All right, we are taking you back in time right away. It is not Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever you get to listen to this, sometime after January 20th. It is Friday, January 17th, and due to some scheduling, audibling, I have Taylor Kyles in here from the past to talk to you about the future and why the Patriots may or may not be on a Commanders level track. And Taylor, as you and I just discussed off air, this could mean one of two things, given the Commanders are going to play tomorrow, Saturday. Either they upset the Lions, okay, and go to the NFC Championship game, and people think you and I are lunatics for suggesting or even entertaining the possibility that the Patriots could go to the AFC Championship game next year, or they lose. Everyone celebrates a successful season in Washington, and we draw some reasonable parallels. How do you feel about going into this unknown, which will be very known to everyone else who's listening and watching right now?
I'm nervous, but hey, if anything, maybe it'll just be a precursor to some crazy turnaround for the team next year if the Commanders actually do manage to pull it off. But yeah, I'm going to be careful-ish with my words, so this doesn't look too insane after the weekend.
Well, you're a big Marvel guy, so I feel like it's okay to play with the space-time continuum here of all the guests that we've had here on Pass Interference. And, of course, people can find you, Pat's Daily, everywhere across CLNS Media, and should be if they're not already. What I want to ask you now, though, because another thing we just discussed off air is how slow things have gotten, I'd say, the last 72 hours. And that's okay. Like, Mike Vrabel got hired on Monday, just barely a week after Drake Maye got fired. Right now, it's been a whirlwind 11 days here in New England. And as things start to slow down, I think they're waiting to build the staff the right way and obviously figure out who might be interested and who can even talk, given some candidates are on playoff staffs. Taking all that in, digesting it, give me a vibes check. How are you feeling right now about the state of the franchise?
I'm feeling pretty good. Like last year, the one thing that kind of got me off the edge was, okay, they got Drake Maye. So, off season wasn't great before that, but at least that gives you hope for the future. This year, now you got the quarterback and you have a serious head coach in Mike Vrabel, who ideally is going to bring a culture of discipline, of toughness, and obviously the credibility that he comes with having been a head coach before, having won 3 Super Bowls with the team, being in the Hall of Fame and all that. Now, obviously, not knowing who the coordinators are going to be and the rest of where this coaching staff is going to shake out, I can't say I'm too excited necessarily, but just knowing that they are in good hands at the 2 most important positions in the organization does give me some optimism after what was just got to be a very, very tough season to follow, especially towards the end there.
Yeah, two in a row, 4-13, back-to-back, coming off an 8-9 where, you and I were both watching the Matt Patricia offense, as everyone was, going, what the hell is this? That offense scored points, man. It's something we've not seen a whole lot since, even if it made less sense than the structure of the past 2 offenses. But anyway, let's leave the past in the past. One thing I do want to note, because I might be the only Patriots podcaster, writer, reporter, whatever, not talking about that coaching staff and the lack of names. What I'll say is this from someone I talked to today, if we haven't heard any OC candidates and ensuing assistants, it's not only because Mike Vrabel's considering people still working right now in the playoffs, but I think what he would like to do is start at the top, find an offensive coordinator, then fill in down below. So I've thrown out, in case people missed this earlier this week or last week now, by the time they hear this, Tyler Hughes could stay on staff given his connection to Mike Vrabel. Jason Hotailing is currently an offensive assistant with the offensive line in Chicago. Before that with the Titans and Mike Vrabel, who loved his interview before he hired him in 2023. So, there are names here, and defensive guys could be holdovers. We'll see. They're being patient. That's the reason we're going to wait. But right now, we're going to hit fast forward. So the Commanders, whether they're out or not right now, I think is the highest end outcome for the Patriots in 2025. You're here, so I assume that means you agree it's even possible. Yes?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Now, the reason there's a parallel is not because just a young quarterback or you have a head coach. It's everything. A year ago, the Commanders were the Patriots right now. They were a team with a top 5 pick. They led the league in cap space going into free agency. Patriots have over $120 million. That's almost $30 million more than anybody else. They have a new culture-building head coach who's in his second stint as a head coach, as we know, very valuable experience. And they're a franchising that's attempting to kind of just shake off dysfunction like a wet dog who's coming back in the house. So the difference, obviously, is what happens next. Do you build? Do you sign guys in free agents? Do you build through the draft? Washington's plan succeeded, 12-5 season, wild card berth, all of that. Patriots don't need to get 12 wins to succeed. But if they do, what are the odds right now, before they make any signings, before they make any draft picks, before they fill out this staff, that they get somewhere near this next season, in your opinion?
I'll put it at like a 55% leaning towards a 60. I think I'll feel more
really
optimistic depending on who is on staff. And a lot of that is because, like I said, the most important spots are taken care of, right? You got Mike Vrabel, you got Drake Maye. There are certain things you assume they're going to have going into this season. Whereas with Gerard, we had no idea really. There was optimism and you wanted to see him succeed, but then as we saw, his lack of experience really hurt them. But now that the Patriots do have all of these resources, there are a ton of holes to address. And I know we'll get to that a little bit later, but the fact that they actually can do it, and now you have a quarterback head coach combo where when you're sitting down at the table in free agency, you actually have something to offer, something to, wet some palates maybe. Whereas last season you had a rookie head coach, a staff that was almost completely unproven, and you didn't even know who the quarterback was going to be. And a big thing, I think, a big reason the Commanders were able to reset was because they signed a ton of veterans. Like when you think about the people other than Jaden Daniels making plays for that team, it's a lot of older players. And with the Patriots defensively, injuries were a big part of that, right? They're a veteran defense, but a ton of those guys were banged up, didn't play, what have you. Offense, it really stood out, right? Where it wasn't just injuries, it was just youth at every position, and just it really hampered what they were able to do on a consistent basis because you had so many guys that you couldn't rely on. So I think this year, if you surround Drake Maye with veteran talent, these coaches with veteran talent, less unknowns, and then maybe on the defensive side of the ball, you get healthier, maybe add a couple of additions to the trenches, and then best player available in the draft so you don't have to make the reaches you did last year. I think this is a very different looking team, especially if they do have that discipline and you can maximize the roster the way we saw Vrabel do when he was in Tennessee.
Okay, and I'm going to do this for the both of us. Disclaimer: it is still the middle of January. Like, Patriots do not have this roster. They have not gotten near free agency. They don't have a plan yet. They haven't gotten close to the draft. You don't know who's on staff. This is, as it stands right now, based on the tiny bits of information we have, what would your guess be? That said, your percentage there, 55, 60% lean towards they should do this, double-digit wins, push for a wild card spot, is like a factor of 5 over mine. I have it 5 to 10%. Like
that's fair. That's fair.
And it's not because I disagree with your core tenet of like quarterback matters most, head coach matters second most. You look at that combination, in my opinion, whether it's this year or the next 5 seasons, that's a top 12 pairing in the NFL, period. That's where I stand in my belief in Drake Maye and Mike Vrabel. So that's good. What I need to know, though, is not only that they surround them with appropriate talent, that talent stays healthy, and you've got a weak schedule and you take advantage of it, but you also get a little bit lucky. So I want to say again, I think an 8-9 win season next year, just being in the mix, hang in the mix, be at the bottom of the conversation, right in there, in a way they've not been, would be a successful season. So let's make the case against it really quick, because again, keep ourselves grounded. I mentioned getting lucky. When you look at the Commanders' point differential, and this to me is a really good indicator of your kind of run of play, how often are you really winning down to down versus just kind of getting lucky in the end or winning these tight games based on a bounce of the ball. In a normal season, they would be closer to 10 or 11 wins versus 12. So there's an automatic bump there where they're winning these games late. And you could describe it to Jaden Daniels' bravery and his accuracy and his experience. And there's something to be said for that. There's also something to be said for a Hail Mary where the dude who gives it up is waving to the fans while the offense bum rushes him into the end zone. And you can't count on that year after year. They've been healthy, as I mentioned. This is a team that was better in the trenches compared to the Patriots where they are right now, worst offensive line of the league. And you had a tentpole player, wide receiver, something the Patriots have not had in 5 years. So they are where the Patriots are right now a year ago, but they were a little bit ahead, even if they were picking second ahead of you. And right now the Patriots have the quarterback. Did I leave anything out as far as like the case against the Patriots making this leap moving forward?
I think the other one is that the premium positions on offense outside of quarterback are going to be tough to address. And I think Drake Maye is a good enough player that he'll be able to mitigate that as long as you put a lot of support around him in other places. But I keep trying to figure out, how do they get the wide receiver one? How do they get their franchise left tackle? I don't really know, because neither position is super strong in the draft. The Patriots are in a weird spot as well, where it feels like to get the best value for left tackle, for wide receiver, they're going to have to do some maneuvering. And then in free agency, it's basically like, all right, you got some options, but if those are off the board for one reason or another, you're probably dealing with stopgap options. And those are two other factors where I think Drake Maye can carry this, offense pretty far. And then on the defensive side of the ball also, I think just you don't know if a lot of these veterans are going to be healthy. If they come back and they play to the standard we expect, I really think this could be a formidable defense like we expected last offseason. But we really don't know how the safeties are going to be. Christian Barmore's long-term health, Juwan Bentley even, and he's a guy whose contract's expiring. So there's definitely some reasons on both sides of the ball, I think, where you can for sure say, you know what, it would be a bit of a miracle if they were able to get past that threshold.
Yeah, and they might have to replace, let's be honest, up to 4 offensive line starters in 2025. And the fifth guy, Mike Onwenu, you hope plays right guard, but might have to go to right tackle based on whomever else you do add or don't. And, I exclude David Andrews there, mostly out of a health reason, though he updated us this week that this week, meaning last week, by the time the folks get to this, he finally bench pressed on that bum shoulder that required surgery, which was leaning towards more experimental for a football player than like, oh, you'll be back in 8 weeks or 8 months, whatever it might be, had it been a more traditional injury. So you've got the offensive line. I would also add the defensive line. Like Jonathan Jones said on this podcast last episode, that's where he wants to dive in. They need to upgrade there. And not just from a high-end talent standpoint, where you're right, Christian Barmore's health is obviously paramount. Let's get that out of the way. The thing we all care about the most. But also, football-wise, a big question mark. He came back, then had to go home, and who knows what that looks like for him. So it's the high-end talent and the depth behind him, because none of the defensive linemen the Patriots rolled out after the first 6 plays in an opening drive, right, where you've got to just freshen those bodies. Scared anybody. These are waiver wire claims. Daniel Akewale's playing 70% of the snaps, never done half in his entire career for a single season. So it's depth, it's high-end talent, and some really, really important positions. All right, let's get to your favorite part here. Let's lay out the whole plan, why this will happen, either 55% to you, 5% to me, filling out the coaching staff, reasonable plan, step 1. Who's the OC hire? What are you doing to kind of boost your odds here?
Offense coordinator, I think it's Josh. Because when you think about, all right, who do you want to bring in to lead this offense? You want somebody that can and has called plays. You want somebody who can and has designed an offense. And ideally, you'd like somebody with experience developing quarterbacks because you have Drake Maye, right? You don't want to really – that's why the Rams hires kind of worry me. I think Mike LaFleur is a great candidate. Nick Caley is someone they've shown interest in, of course. But they don't have a lot of experience at quarterback. I think LaFleur, his background before he was a coordinator and started working up in the pass game was with receivers, and Caley's been with tight ends. So Josh, I think it's easy. He's a guy where you don't expect he's going to go anywhere. I think the head coach cycle for him is dried up. If he gets an OC job, I think he's just going to take it. And it's a great opportunity for him. It's kind of like another chance to, as someone who was integral in developing Tom Brady, another chance to develop a really talented quarterback who could probably take you to some pretty high heights. So I just think it's the easy answer. I'm sure they're going to, I at least hope they're going to do a thorough search and make sure they have all their options and they know what is out there. But just Josh makes the most sense.
He makes the most sense. And again, stick with the Washington parallel, where a year ago, the Commanders had the most cap space. They had a top 5 pick. They've got to rework front office. They've got to retread defensive head coach, culture setter. What Dan Quinn then did was hire another retread head coach who had been an offensive CEO before in Cliff Kingsbury, and set aside the scheme fit, which is obviously very important. But that notion that I've worked with quarterbacks before, I've developed them, I also know how to run the show and fill up my staff is huge, because then that lets Dan Quinn be Dan Quinn on the defensive side of the ball and as the overall CEO, and we'll let Mike Vrabel do the same here in New England, which is what he's best at, as opposed to, we even saw with Bill Belichick, like the limits of the greatest coach of all time came up and were exposed when he had to play offensive coordinator and then dip into that room the year after and be the offensive line coach in 2023. So I think that hire is a great one. And there is some upside to the unknown, right? Sometimes that ticket is a Sean McVay. Other times it's not. I would also go with Josh here. Again, I would also add this. Let's say the plan is to hire Josh or another CEO. He runs a pretty complex system. Like sometimes it just kind of collapses under the weight of its own complexity. If you do sign a bunch of veterans, they're ready to roll with that. And that could provide you with a little bit of edge in those games that could be toss-ups of, we're doing more that you can't account for because our playbook's bigger, because we can afford to do that because we have a bunch of older guys in the roster.
Including Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne had a career-high 800 yards under McDaniels. Hunter Henry had a career-high, I think it was 9 touchdowns under Josh. So those older guys can pick it up, and obviously with Drake, he's going to have to come along. But from everything we know, the guy just inhales information. T.C. McCartney called him the smartest guy in the building, so I'm not too worried about it if Mac Jones can figure it out.
Was that the most bittersweet quote of the season for you? Like, the 22-year-old is the smartest person in the building.
I was like, oh. My exact reaction was just, that's awesome, and just so not awesome. Really kind of unfortunate.
Like, the only time that should really be true is if you've got like a high school graduation in the audience, like the 22-year-old who's been held back 4 years is the smartest person because he's been here the longest, and the opposite is true of Drake Maye. He's the youngest, most experienced of them anyway. Great for the future. sad commentary in the state of the franchise as far as TC McCartney goes. Now, first of all, hat tip TC McCartney, who had some role along with Alex Van Pelt in developing Drake Maye. All right, it's that time again. It's that time where I tell you about America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's where I tell you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, and you'll be like, hey, Callahan, look, you're just doing an ad read. And I'd be like, you're right. I'm doing an ad read for PrizePicks, but not because it's in front of me. It's because I've been playing PrizePicks for over a year. And as they continue to support us here on the podcast, I'm telling you, it has truly never, ever been easier to join. And this is how easy it is. Looking ahead to the big game. You know what I'm talking about. Rhymes with Super Bowl. You can win not by playing a lineup of 2 player stat projections where you go more or less based on whatever number accompanies that player. You can win by playing 1. That's right. 1 player stat projection. If you put in more or less and you add the free pick PrizePicks is giving you for the big game, where this is all that has to happen. One of the starting quarterbacks has to throw for more than 1 yard. Boom, you win. That's it. That's how easy this is. A 2-player lineup where 1 is a gimme and 1 is you picking any player, any stat, anything that you want, and just go more or less at PrizePicks. You file that lineup in, boom, you're a winner. So when I tell you they're giving away millions of dollars in promo funds, when I tell you you can win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks, and if you want to keep it small, you can do it just like that with the free pick of the big game plus whatever else you want. And this could be if you're in California or Texas or Georgia or Florida or Massachusetts like me. Again, I'm playing PrizePicks a lot, and not even on football. But for the big game, there's no better place to be than at PrizePicks. So sign up now, where you can use Venmo or MasterCard or whatever you want. And if you're brand new, you will get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus, 50. It's guaranteed. So sign up now with PrizePicks. Download the app, use code CLNS to get that $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. We move on to free agency. Mike Vrabel said they had to become a destination. That's obviously true. Money talks the loudest. There is a millionaire's tax here. There is the consideration of just everything that's gone wrong the last 5 years starts to, overshadow what happened the 20 years before that. So what is your general plan of attack here? And if you want to get granular with names, go as long as you want.
So for the offensive side of the ball, like I mentioned earlier, you need to get experience. You have a ton of young players. I think if anything, one of the benefits of last season was so many young guys got a ton of experience, like DeMontre Jacobs, like Ben Brown, like guys who you would hope would be depth pieces in the future. Some guys are, restricted or exclusive rights free agents, so they need to be brought back that way. But young guys got experience. But this year, enough of that. Get Drake Maye, some guys who know what they're doing, because again, I think that's a big part of why Jaden Daniels has managed to have success in Washington. So first part of that is getting it in the trenches. Both sides of the ball, the Patriots need to look very, very different up front, because it's a big reason they were so bad. You couldn't run the ball consistently, you couldn't protect the quarterback. Now, Patrick McCarry seems like the guy who makes the most sense. Layden Robinson and Caden Wallace, they finished on high notes relative to what the rest of their season was and where they were drafted. But is Mike Vrabel really going to feel confident in saying, a 4th-round pick at left guard, even if you have Cole Strange? Do you think left guard is completely secure? And then right tackle, Caden Wallace might have a future in the league. He's a patient player. He's savvy, needs to be better against power for sure. But I don't know if you want to bank on him. McCarry has played pretty much every position on the offensive line. He's been a left guard and a right tackle for the Ravens. I like that you can kind of hedge your bet there. Or if Mike Vrabel wants to say, you know what, I'm not messing around, get Trey Smith. He played left guard when he was in college. Put him and Mike Nwenu, whether it's David Andrews or Cole Strange in the middle, that's a damn good middle of the pocket. Mike Vrabel has really emphasized that. At receiver, T. Higgins kind of worries me, because I think that Mike Vrabel, he's emphasized the importance of receivers. I don't think it's going to be like other regimes where he just says, we'll figure it out. But you're talking about a guy who may demand like $30 million more than that, going to be one of the highest paid receivers, especially if he comes here. But he also has a history of soft tissue injuries. That's something that apparently Mike Vrabel has very little tolerance for. Are they really going to pay that much money for a guy who might not be available all the time? I'm not sure. So I think Darius Slayton, Nick Westbrook-Akine, not exciting names. Both guys that have played X receiver, at least have experience. Darius Slayton with Ryan Cowden, they're a bit familiar. Slayton is Walter Payton, man of the Ward nominee, gives you something in the locker room. We know that wide receiver room. So much came out of there. You'd like them to be a lot more quiet. So maybe you add Slayton, Nick Westbrook-Akine, a guy who came up, was undrafted in Tennessee under Mike Vrabel and came up and has been a respectable veteran. maybe you throw them in there. But I'm going to say right now, unless you get some guys in the draft, and I think they will, I don't think free agency is going to be really exciting for weapons, except for that Austin Hooper re-sign tweet. That's going to hit like crazy because it's probably going to be the best addition they got. And then real quick, defensive side, Milton Williams and Josh Sweat for the Eagles. I really, really like them. First of all, behind Christian Barmore and Devon Gottschall, Patriots have no depth at defensive tackle. And as many 5-down fronts as they run, I think that a guy like Milton Williams is really a starter for you, and especially a guy you're going to want in the rotation pretty heavily. Been one of the best pass rushers, period, in football in a contract year. And then Josh Sweat. You have no edge rush at all right now. It's Anthony Jennings and Keon White doing his absolute best. He's more of an interior rusher. So Josh Sweat, I think, is a good guy to kind of hold it down for a few seasons. Hopefully they draft somebody as well. And then I think really re-sign John Jones. He has the safety, the corner flexibility, more on an Adrian Phillips kind of plan where maybe he doesn't play a ton. He's more in the background. He plays when he needs to, let the young guys play and see what they've got there. But on the defense, really, I think you just need more young explosiveness. So maybe the middle to end of the draft there. Abdul Carter, please, please, please at number 4. That'd be fantastic and much needed for this defense. But trenches on both sides are the really big places where you got to upgrade. And then I just think in terms of receiving talent, get some guys who are just reliable. They don't need to be studs, but if you have a strong run game, you're protecting Drake Maye, at least he can get the ball and maximize those guys and then make it a huge priority in 2026 once some of these holes are filled.
So my man saves up for a whole year and then takes his big bag of cash and goes back to dollar stores. That's what you're telling me.
Hey, man, I'm not excited about it. If you like the trenches, I think you'll like this projection. But, I mean, it's just like we said.
Trey Smith would be expensive.
It's tough. It's tough.
Okay. So, look, I like the broader theme that you brought there. Like, there are a lot of mid-level veterans, guys who are not going to break the bank, and it's not because they're inexpensive that makes them attractive. It's the fact that when you sign players to contracts like that, they're more likely to outperform those contracts and then provide you value. And the way you go, that was a great signing. The only way that T. Higgins at $30 million lives up to that contract is if you get the best of T. Higgins we've not seen yet. So you're betting on something happening that you've never seen before. That's just how it goes to the top of free agency, paying for future performance. Now, I would take a swing at T. Higgins because I think, and you could, Hunter Henry's had a lot of injuries, but he's an example of sometimes the soft tissue stuff. The Patriots' approach and philosophy has been, we're just going to run this out of you. We run a lot more than that. That seems to solve some of the soft tissue injuries. Bring him in here. Granted, the hamstring history is not great, and those can be very finicky injuries, but you need a receiver who's going to tilt the field, have some sort of gravity running through coverage. Now, if you don't like T. Higgins, fine. Chris Godwin, talk about reliable. Again, some injuries in there. People who love to do this about receivers, he run block so well. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, it just, if he didn't, that'd be all right with me. But he does everything really well. Plays inside, can play out. Trusted, experienced receiver. Had a little bit of experience covering Chris Godwin when he was in college at Penn State. Great dude, ultimate professional. So I'm looking there, top end. Ronnie Stanley is another name I'm looking at in free agency. And this is much because T. Higgins and Godwin and Ronnie Stanley are the best at their positions. They're the best at premium positions. And I think if you can solve, and plug the biggest holes in your roster, which dictate winning and losing every single Sunday in the season, then I can go to the draft and say, which we'll get to in a second, just give me the best player available. Because, yes, Abdul Carter, like you're saying, that's where I'm at right now, looking at number 4. Great player, premium position. But if he's not there, I don't feel like I need to reach in a way I think you would agree. Caden Wallace probably wasn't a third-round talent last year, especially given he only played right tackle. Right or wrong?
I know. I would agree. I'd agree.
And so Jalen Polk was a projected second-round pick. People seem to forget that as he goes to these historic lows. But stepping back from the, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Ronnie Stanley shopping, you go 1 out of 3, fine. I think that's a success. But that's where I start. Fill in with the mid-level veterans, and this brings me back to the Commanders. Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner, Frankly Louvu, who is a 28-year-old linebacker, just came off of 99 tackles, 8 sacks in a pick. That's a mid-level veteran. Guys who come in, know what to do, where to be, they're professional, bring the system to life, the culture to life, and are not that expensive. Washington also, you talk about the trenches, Tyler Biotish, experienced center. Patriots may or may not need a center. That's an example. Nick Allegretti, that was another guy from Kansas City, not so great, but good enough at left guard. Jamison Crowder even. Zach Ertz, who way outperformed expectations. Somehow, I didn't see it, but that's the point of these signings. If they bust, it's not a huge deal. If you hit, it's at worst a double. And that's what the Patriots need to build out their depth and to get more value out of a roster that's not giving you much in the way of value or anything the last couple of years.
And something else I'd like to see them emphasize in this free agent class is guys from winning cultures. David Andrews mentioned that to us when he was cleaning out his locker. I think that started to become a theme. You started hearing players talk about just there's so many young guys who aren't used to winning and all that. Yeah, that's true. And I think we're like a year or two away from the Patriots not having anybody left who has won a championship as a player, who is currently still a player. So like the guys like T. Higgins, Patrick McCarry, and Ronnie Stanley, like the Eagles players I mentioned, get those guys who know what the standard is. They know how to come to work and they know what it takes to be successful, because if you keep bringing in, like, the mid-level guys are important, but I think it matters when your starters are guys who are the ones who Mike Vrabel and Drake Maye both said, you want the players to be the ones who really establish the culture. The head coach, his job is really to say this is going to be tolerated and this will not. But the players are the ones who are leading by example. So I think that's another big part that they need to do this offseason.
Yeah, and to the Commanders' credit, because again, this is the comparison here, the template, if you will. Bobby Wagner comes from a great culture, leader. Austin Eckler, consummate professional. Zach Ertz, like, was in Arizona going, I'm trying my best, but it's the Cardinals, okay? And then goes to Washington with a functional organization and a great quarterback, and then springs back to life. So it's those guys that can provide the residual value. And forget the Commanders for a second. Like, I don't know if you remember this, Taylor, but when I was, growing up and watching the Patriots become the Patriots, some of Belichick's first signings, in addition to the fact he always made the mid-level veteran like a staple of his free agency approach, Anthony Pleasant, Bobby Hamilton, Roman Pfeiffer. This was more expensive, but Rodney Harrison, back end of his career, Tyrone Poole, like all these guys who, again, came in, there was no learning curve. Here's a system, be a part of the culture, drive it. Harrison was a captain his first year. Like, that speaks to, I think, kind of in the middle of what you're saying. Like, the culture part is important, as well as just like the monetary value of what you could bring, whereas there's not as much risk because we kind of know what you are. And if you surprise us, perfect, because that's what they need to start doing now. There have not been many signings that you look at, aside from maybe Austin Hooper, that you're like, oh, that was a great move.
That was nice. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah. It's Game Time, the best secondary ticket marketplace you will find, for one simple reason. They have a lowest price guarantee. I mean, you could do this even if you want to go to the Super Bowl. Find that exact seat. What's your view? Compare it to another one, but only at Game Time, where you get not only the seat view and the lowest price guarantee, but Game Time picks, where they give you all the best deals right up front, all in pricing. You don't even have to go searching for all these different deals. It's just the best of the best right there. You can find your tickets and go to the Super Bowl or any other event in less than 60 seconds. So what are you waiting for? Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase in these lifetime memories. Terms do apply. Again, just create an account. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, the best tickets, the lowest price guaranteed tickets to any game, concert, show, playoff, or regular season. Guaranteed. What time is it? Game time. All right, we both hit on the draft. Again, it's more than 4 months away. No one hold us to this, okay? No one's even writing in pencil. It's just like just writing with your finger in the air. But when you look at this,
Disney Channel will.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it goes away immediately. Positions of note. I have not taken a deep dive into this, so I don't want to commit to anything, but like general philosophy, I've said best player available as often as you can. Do you think that's the way that the Patriots should attack it? Because when you look at Washington, they did a little bit of both. It was obviously Jaden Daniels at the top, Brandon Coleman later on, but they had filled out most of the rosters, so they felt like they could get the best talent available.
I think it should be best player available, but I don't like going one way, like one or the other, or fully one way or the other, because I think you get in very dangerous territory where you can get the best player available, and by your grading, that could be a kicker in the third round. Do I want the Patriots to take a kicker in the third round? Hell no. Do I want them to reach for a player that they need at a certain position? Obviously no, because that's basically been what's been screwing them the past few years. What I would like to see is, yes, I think the groundwork should be best player available, but in the back of your head, understand the spine of your team needs improvement. So you talk about the offensive line. I'd even throw like tight end, really like the middle of the field. Tight end, you got some good players, especially if you re-sign Austin Hooper, but you don't have a lot of young dynamic talent where you expect them at some point to be starting caliber players. You say the same about the defensive line. Not a whole lot of young talent there that you're developing. Linebacker, even if you bring back a Christian Ellis, who takes over if Juwan Bentley has to go down or if he doesn't come back after a couple seasons? Safety, I think Marte Mapu, you see what you have in him. I like Del Pettis as a third-ish, more fourth safety, but with Peppers and Duggar having both been injured significantly last year, what's really going to happen to them long term? When you look down the middle of this team, I think there's a lot of concerns. Running back, I throw in there as well. Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, they're going to be here for a while, but you'd also like some explosive young talent because Mondre gets banged up. I think Gibson was banged up because his role last season was a little funky in the way that he was used. So obviously you want to add some, I think, young pass catching talent as well. Get Drake Maye, especially in round 3. I think there's going to be some really nice value picks of guys that they could plug in and at least have roles right away. So, of course, no more reaches. I'm really strictly against that, but I also don't think you just pick literally the best player on the board every time. I think you say, okay, if these guys are graded pretty closely, but I really like this guy, and I think he's going to be, a move tight end that we can put all over the field and really be a nice complement to Drake Maye, I think you want to consider that as well.
Yeah, I like it. Like you're talking about providing meaningful depth in addition to guys like the top 2 rounds. As always, you're chasing high-end potential starters. And you mentioned running back as something that I hadn't even considered, but it did remind me how many problems I have as a person, because I'll tell you 2 nights ago, I had a dream that Ramondre Stevenson fumbled for an 8th and 9th time. That guy has not played football in 2 weeks. And I wake up going, oh my God, poor Mondre. What am I talking about? The season's over. It's been over. Like, unless he dropped something at the supermarket, I don't know why this could not have possibly happened. Anyway, I have a lot of work to do this offseason as well as the Patriots, but I think it's a great point. Yeah, and the spine of the defense is something that I brought up before, and we saw it more with the injuries, right? Barmore goes out, Bentley's gone, Peppers is sidelined, and you not only need to just cross your fingers that those guys are available and healthy, but understand that if they're not again, you need better answers than what the Patriots had last year, and specifically at defensive tackle. Linebacker Christian Ellis helped the best way he could, but probably long-term best suited for his original role, of course, special teamer, maybe some dime linebacker stuff if he continues to grow. So, yeah, I think the draft for depth and not just, the best teams, bottom line, thread the needle between best player available and addressing their own needs, not immediately, but in the long term. Because then it's not too much pressure. If the rookie comes in and flops like Jalen Polk did, you're not thinking of him as a plug-and-play guy in the way the Patriots did, and all that pressure's not on him that obviously affected him mentally last year.
100%. And then, the first and second rounds are the only ones where you're really even expecting those guys to be starters year one. Like, I know when we talk about Caden Wallace and Javon Baker and Layden Robinson, we all were hoping at some point they would become starters because, again, there were holes that needed to be filled. But it wasn't fair to say these guys are going to be starters because a third-round pick is someone you hope becomes a quality backup, maybe a kind of guy that's a role player but isn't a full-blown starter. So I think that's also important to keep in mind. First-rounders, yes, they should start right away. Second-rounders, at the very least, should be impact players for you, even if they're not guys who play most of the snaps. But keep in mind, the guys third and later, they're supposed to be developmental guys. It's great if you get contributions from them, but you can't necessarily expect it. So if you can get the best talent in those areas, that's obviously going to increase the likelihood that those people can actually enter the rotation earlier on.
Right. Now, a couple more notes, because I think the next thing, okay, free agency's over, the staff's been filled, you've had the draft. Who do you want to be? How do you want to play? Like that, what is the framework within which you're filling this? And you could be a smart, tough, defendable football team, and that's great. But like, what are you doing on the field to fulfill that? And I think when you sign players like a Bobby Wagner, to bring this back to Washington, had experience with Dan Quinn from their time in Seattle. That's a guy who, again, brings part of that scheme to life. It's a simplistic scheme. You empower guys like Jonathan Allen just to be single gap, attack upfield. This is who we're going to be. Trade for Marshawn Lattimore when you realize, hey, we can play more man coverage than we expected. And offensively, Cliff Kingsbury, shotgun heavy, spread system suited to Jaden Daniels. Let's say they do most of what we're talking about here. How are you changing the Patriots play style again to maximize their chances of just making this wild card push in 2025?
I'll say offensively, I want them to maximize Drake Maye. Like anytime they're on schedule, I need there to be the threat of pretty much anything, right? I want there to be a chance that he keeps it. I want there to be a chance that the guy going in motion is going to get the ball. Like I want there to constantly be multiple things the defense has to think about. I think Alex Van Pelt did his best. I think there are a lot of limitations he has as a coordinator and as a play caller, but I also think really his main role is developing quarterbacks. He was great at that. Josh McDaniels has been great at most of those things, but I think the amount of window dressing you see in the NFL is at a completely different level where I'm studying Ben Johnson and there's no static plays. The Patriots last year, about like 40% of their plays, there maybe be a shift, but not much else. with the Lions, with all these top offenses, the Ravens, like you don't really know who's got the ball because there's so much moving around where guys are going in different directions, guys are in motion. And then obviously not really a threat with the Lions, but you look at like the Bills with Josh Allen, where their shotgun run game is terrifying. You literally have no idea what's going on because there's linemen pulling, there's skill players pulling, and there's a lot to process. So on top of the obvious things, secure the ball. Don't have the fumbles and all those kinds of things. Play tough. All of those, like, yes, what Mayo said, you want to be able to run the ball. What Vrabel's repeated it too. Yes, you want to always be those things. But offensively, I'd like to see them really stress out defenses by just putting so much on their plate. And then with the Patriots defense, honestly, I just want you to get back to basics. Be the type of defense where when other teams study you, it's like, damn, these guys are really well coached. They don't get picked off. The communication's great, and it just seems like everything flows. Because I remember looking at other defenses, and I used to make fun of them. Just be like, oh my God, you see this guy get blown up when the pick was obvious? Come on, man. Couldn't be the Patriots. Last year, that's exactly who they were. I just want to be able to put on the film and be excited to watch defense again, because I'm going to be honest, outside of the explosives and everything they did bad, I stopped watching full games for the defense because I'm like, this is just bad football. This ain't fun. Let me know enough to do my job, but I am not going to, chart this crap. This is not real football. So back to basics defensively, offensively, just be a nightmare to prepare for every week.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, again, it speaks to, the team building philosophy we're kind of hitting at. Like you have to build in the trenches if you want to play that simple style defensively, right? Reinforce that. It cannot be Devon Godchow and company. Even sometimes, even then, he's not up to be a lead actor, let's say, in that room or in that defense. Offensively, what that also speaks to is Drake Maye's apparent superpower of being his brain. Okay, it's great that he can scramble and run off, or he can do some boot stuff, and he can throw the ball 70 yards, from the far hash to the opposite sideline. But ultimately, if he's in the gun a little bit more, and I think can kind of dissect defenses or get some more hints in a way, while blending that with some, under center drop back play action game, that all feels very McDaniels-esque, and specifically with Brady, which is not to compare the two. It's just to say that when you've got a smart quarterback who's processing so quickly, like, let him do that more often than not. Give him the tools to do so. Now, to your point about Alex Van Pelt, I think the limitations, I think the roster also limited a lot of what he wanted to do, right? Like, he would have introduced more of that playbook. Told me week, 14, I said, hey, how much of your playbook's on film? Like, what are you not done? He's like 85%. That 15% is probably really freaking helpful, considering it's probably the most complex in the playbook on third down.
It's all the runs.
He couldn't trust them sometimes to reach the second level on inside zone, and you're just like, why would I ask you to do these 400 level concepts if we just can't get our ABCs down? And so the way you do that with a largely same roster, again, is to bring in more veterans who are experienced. I think the Patriots can do that on both sides of the ball. I'm curious what they'll do on defense because there is more experience there. And I think you still want to stay man heavy with, a tentpole player like Christian Gonzalez. But you need, the corners opposite him to be able to play man to man as well and want to stay flexible. So I'm more open to that. But I think just putting more in Drake Maye's plate and building out with your complexity is a good idea offensively. Anything else we haven't hit on this? Think about what the Commanders did this season, what the Patriots may or may not do next season. I'll throw one at you. The schedule is finally going to be a big help. And the Patriots schedule this year is easier than everyone projected and expected, and that'll happen year to year. But here's some teams on their schedule coming up in 9 to 10 months. The Browns, the Panthers, the Raiders, the Giants, the Titans, the Saints, and God love them, the Jets twice. So
stinky.
I don't expect much to surprise me about those teams, maybe 1 or 2 or 3. But like, this is a Patriots team that I think between the cap room, the young quarterbacks here, the reinforcer, culture builder, head coach, and everything else they've got going from top 5 pick, like the path is clear. You just have to build the car enough that it can go forward and break when you need to and go when you hit the gas.
What did Mike Vrabel say? He wants to be a team that takes advantage of bad football. At least right now, a lot can change in the offseason,
right there.
A lot. And the Patriots right now are like the least talented team in the league. We're talking about it. A lot of resources. They could be a very different team this time next year. So don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. But if they are that team where another team makes a mistake, not only are we going to capitalize by just getting the possession, we're also going to walk down score points. Actually, when an opponent fumbles, we're going to recover it. We're not just going to stand around while the other team goes and falls on the grenade. So if they are that kind of team and they can be advantageous, and then on top of it, Drake Maye another year, hopefully just the discipline overall is tightened up. That's why I really do think they could have that Commanders type season, because yes, it's going to take a lot of luck, but they're probably going to be walking into the season with a ton of luck just because of how things worked out with their schedule.
What else do you think about May in year two? Like the discipline, I talked about like, okay, empower him, like process as much as possible. What else do you think we'll see from him, or do you want to see from him next year?
I want to see, for one, I will say the way he ended the season, I didn't love. I thought he had some of his worst games. That was a little discouraging, where now I kind of talk about what he could be. I'm like, top 10, 12, just because you can't ignore that, right? You started to see some of the mistakes crept up a little bit, the inaccuracy, where like Austin Hooper, I think he had 4 out targets or stick targets. Every single one was behind him. In one of them, they couldn't convert a 4th down because it was behind him. He couldn't adjust. Like, I want to see the consistency, not only in his execution, but also in the ball security. We made a lot, not even excuses for him. He was a rookie. We understood a lot of the turnovers he committed or turnover-worthy plays were different circumstances. Sometimes he wasn't on the same page as guys. Sometimes it was a wild miss like in the Texans game, but that never happened again. Bonehead decisions like trying to throw away and getting picked off against the Bears. Eliminate the ones that are really egregious and then just bring that turnover-worthy play number down. It was a strength in college. Let's get back to there. But really, it's just consistency, because we know the ceiling is very high. He showed a level of football that I don't even think I thought he was capable of as a rookie. So if he can continue to have that success, but also obviously wean away from some of the negatives, that's where I really think he takes a step. And you're saying, okay, Vrabel and May, yeah, we're talking about a potential like top 8 duo in terms of head coach and quarterback in the NFL.
He's one of the guys, because we heard this from Drod all the time, and a ton of other coaches too. And coaches just say this word probably too much, where consistency actually should be the goal, because consistency for him means playing well often. Consistency for most of the rest of the team is not the solution, because you consistently suck, and that's not good. That's bad. In his case, yes, he needed to be more consistent, I think, and that's to be smoothed out over the course of time and growth. And to your point about the turnovers, I was just never going to kill him for that stuff, given all the circumstances, how young he was, inexperienced he was, and what he was also doing to power the offense. He was not just the driver, he was the engine. I will say, though, his play under pressure waned in the last few games. Buffalo, then you had the Chargers, and again, he's not getting a whole lot of help, but that stuff that early in games he was doing really well, handling his business, taking hits, and later would either just walk into sacks or be more inaccurate and a little bit more erratic. And I think stuff that you can control, even if it gets harder. So I think that he's a really tough kid. I think he's a really smart kid. I want him to continue to push those limits in a way that we saw him try to push limits on the field. Can I get away with this throw? Can I find that guy at this angle on the move, et cetera, et cetera? Push yourself mentally, because he knows he's good. He's not chasing good anymore. He's chasing great. Go do that. All right. Did we leave anything else out?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything.
Good job by us.
Well done.
Yeah. All right.
Good job,
at the risk of these teams, because I'm going to spring this on you, already being eliminated by the time this episode is out. Any Super Bowl thoughts? You could do just one team, a pick, a matchup, or what? Something you just want to see. No prediction. Just this would be awesome to see team X or Y or whatever.
I think Ravens-Lions. The Ravens are just loaded this year, man. I just think they're too talented. Like, I think Josh Allen's playing at another level, but I think the Ravens push past them. And I think even though the Chiefs are the Chiefs, there's a whole lot of reasons why you shouldn't bet against them, especially in the playoffs. But again, I think the Ravens are loaded, and Lamar is playing out of his mind. And then from the NFC, I need the Lions. I need it. I need a serious NFC contender. They've done everything the right way. They're already on the trajectory, and I think they look like the best team in the NFC. So Ravens, Lions. Also, for an offseason where we're saying the Patriots need to reinforce the trenches, that game is going to be a very good example of, old school football still wins championships.
You know, I'll say too, like for all these front offices, Lions are on an all-time draft heater. Like just pick any era, any GM. I don't care how many Hall of Famers you want to stack up. Like this team is up there with anybody. The Eagles have drafted exceptionally well, obviously, and their rookies are helping out right now. The Rams completely remade their defense.
Oh, they're amazing.
Unbelievable. Ravens, always good and up there. Bills, so-and-so. The Chiefs can afford to hit and miss with Patrick Mahomes. But the Texans have also drafted really well. So, like, if there's a lesson to be learned, as there often is come mid-January, the best teams are built through the draft. So this doesn't really dovetail with the rest of what we were talking about because I know these veterans get a bigger head coach, build out the offense. But it's just a reminder, like also sometimes this thing takes time in the NFL. So we'll see. Taylor, a pleasure as always. Great work by you. I hope you enjoy the games that have already been played by the time people get to listen to this. We will have you back. Enjoy the off season and all my best, my man.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.